In this chapter, James Locke describes his experiences working with adolescents who have mood disorders. You'll notice throughout this PowerPoint that I've hyperlinked a number of documents for you that will provide more up-to-date information on the various topics in this chapter. This first hyperlink, notice the colored title with the underline and click on that, will take you to a page about depression in children and teens published by the National Institute of Mental Health. Pay attention throughout the slides for other hyperlinks. Depression is common during adolescence. As you can see here, depression becomes a stronger risk factor as children age, and early intervention is important in the long-term prognosis. Depression may look differently in teens than it does in adults. Whenever you are assessing your client and building a diagnostic impression, remember that there are a number of developmentally appropriate issues that teens might experience, such as bereavement, separation anxiety, or an adjustment disorder that could mimic the signs and symptoms of depression. Instead of strictly following the content in the chapter, I thought that I would supplement the chapter with information regarding the different diagnoses and how they are treated in the new DSM. Here you can see how major depression looks in the new manual. Here's another hyperlink title too. This will take you to a page that describes these changes. In teenagers, there are a number of risk factors that could increase the likelihood of depression. In general, females tend to have more depressive symptoms, and I'd encourage you to be especially aware of depression in your early adolescent girls. This, as you all know, is a terribly difficult time for girls in our society, as they have been bombarded with messages from the media regarding how their bodies ought to look, and as they enter puberty, these changes can be pretty hard to deal with. We'll talk more about this in our discussion of eating disorders and body image. Here's a change to the DSM that you might not have expected to see, but dysthymia has been replaced with a new title, Persistent Depressive Disorder. Basically, this is sub-threshold depression. There have been a few changes to bipolar disorder in the new manual too. It might be worth your time to take a look at this hyperlink for more information. Bipolar disorder does occur in teens, while it is rare in young children. If one or more parents has the illness, then the chances are greater for a child to develop the disorder. There is certainly a genetic component here, but I also believe that environment is important too. Just like the new category of persistent depressive disorder, cyclothymic disorder is sort of like a sub-threshold form of bipolar disorder. In teenagers, these symptoms must be present for a year in order to warrant diagnosis. Like other mood disorders, cyclothymia is rare during childhood, but usually begins to present during adolescence. As an aside, there are no significant changes to cyclothymia in the new DSM. Mood disorders, because they have a strong biological component, are usually quite responsive to treatment with medication. As you guys know, brain chemistry is rapidly changing during adolescence. If you have a client that you're working with that is taking medications for depression or bipolar disorder, educating them about their medication and how it could impact them will be an important part of counseling. Here I've hyperlinked pages that will give you more information about the FDA-approved medications that are used to treat depressive disorders and bipolar disorders in teenagers. When you begin to work with teenagers, remember that this period of life is the most developmentally significant, second to early childhood. In addition to the changes associated with puberty, teens are moving towards autonomy and independence. Their progression along this trajectory is determined in part by their environment. During early adolescence, you are likely to have a greater chance of involving the teen's parents, as the teen is still emotionally connected to the family. As teens develop an increased capacity for insight, your strategies for counseling will need to shift. We talked a bit in class last week about narcissistic injury. I really like this term because it captures so much of what is happening for teens at this stage. As they start to break ties with their family and develop their own independence, they will be sensitive to how they are perceived by others. During this phase of growth, direct questioning will likely be a futile strategy for most of what you do. Groups become important at this age, and as such, you could choose to capitalize on this normal shift away from the family toward peer support by incorporating groups into your work with teens. By the time that most kids are late teenagers, your work with them will mimic your work with young adults. Whenever teens during this phase present with depression, work to reestablish their normal routines as is possible, and then you can begin to incorporate other strategies. Here are a number of factors to consider that will be important for you to keep in mind as you work with teens that are experiencing a mood disorder. In the next chapter, we will discuss anxiety disorders.